The hospital parking lot was a chaos of flashing lights and roaring engines. A rusty, black-painted van screeched to a halt, its side door sliding open with a bang. Out jumped 6 huge men, leather jackets covered in patches, their faces hard as stone. The Hells Angels. In the middle of them, carried on a makeshift stretcher, was a boy, no older than 12, his face pale, blood soaking through a rag tied around his leg. The angels stormed toward the hospital doors, their boots thumping like war drums. "Move! He needs a doctor now!" bellowed a giant man with a gray beard, his voice shaking the glass doors. Nurses froze, patients gasped, and security guards reached for their radios. But at the front desk, a doctor in a crisp white coat stood firm, arms crossed. "We can't treat him," she said coldly. "No insurance, no service." The angels stopped dead, their eyes burning with rage. The boy groaned, his small hand clutching the stretcher. The bearded man leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. "You're gonna let a kid die?" The doctor didn't flinch. The air crackled with tension, like a storm about to break. Then one of the angels, a skinny guy with a scar across his cheek, turned and sprinted back to the van. "We don't need you," he spat. "We brought our own ambulance." The crowd gasped as he yanked open the van's back doors, revealing a mess of medical gear, bandages, IV bags, even a rusty defibrillator. What was going on? Why wouldn't the doctor help? And how did a biker gang have their own ambulance? The boy's eyes fluttered, his breath weak, as the angels prepared to take matters into their own hands. What happened next would shock everyone. The story rewinds to 2 days earlier, in a dusty small town called Red Hollow. The sun burned hot, and the streets were quiet except for the hum of motorcycles. Tommy, a skinny 12-year-old with messy brown hair, rode his beat-up bike through the back alleys. He wasn't like other kids. Tommy lived with his uncle Mitch, a gruff man who ran with the Hells Angels. Mitch wasn't soft or cuddly, but he always made sure Tommy had food and a place to sleep. Tommy loved the Angels. They were like a big, loud family. They'd ruffle his hair, sneak him candy, and let him sit on their bikes. But Tommy's life wasn't easy. Kids at school teased him, calling him biker brat, and he often came home with bruises. That day, Tommy was pedaling fast, trying to beat the sunset. He'd promised Mitch he'd be home before dark, but as he cut through an empty lot, his bike hit a jagged piece of glass. The tire popped, and Tommy flew over the handlebars, crashing hard onto the gravel. Pain shot through his leg like fire. He looked down and saw a deep gash, blood pouring out, staining his jeans. He tried to stand, but his leg buckled. Panic set in. He was alone, and the nearest hospital was miles away. Tommy dragged himself to the roadside, his vision blurry. That's when he heard it, the low rumble of a motorcycle. It was Jake, one of the younger angels, with a scar on his cheek and a kind smile. "Kid, what'd you do to yourself?" Jake said, jumping off his bike. Tommy tried to explain, but his words were shaky. Jake's face turned serious. "Hold on, buddy. We're getting you help." He scooped Tommy up and sped toward the Angels clubhouse, a rundown garage filled with bikes and beer cans. Inside, Mitch and the other Angels crowded around. "He's hurt bad," Jake said, laying Tommy on a table. The bearded man, Big Al, the leader, knelt beside Tommy. "We're taking you to the hospital, kid. You're gonna be okay." Tommy nodded, but his stomach twisted. He'd heard stories about the hospital, how they turned away people who couldn't pay. Mitch wasn't rich, and Tommy knew they didn't have insurance. Would the hospital really help him? The Angels loaded Tommy into their van, the same one they later called their ambulance. It wasn't a real ambulance, just a beat-up van they used for hauling stuff, but they'd stuffed it with medical supplies they'd borrowed over the years. As they raced to the hospital, Tommy's leg throbbed, and he felt dizzy. Mitch held his hand, his face pale. "Stay with me, Tommy," he whispered. The angels were tough, but seeing one of their own hurt made them frantic. When they reached the hospital, the trouble started. The doctor at the front desk, Dr. Ellis, took one look at Tommy's ragged clothes and the rough bikers around him and shook her head. "No insurance, no treatment," she said flatly. Big Al's fist clenched. "He's a kid," he roared, but Dr. Ellis wouldn't budge. The angels argued, their voices rising, but the hospital staff called security. The situation was spiraling out of control. Tommy's eyes grew heavy, his breath shallow. Then Jake had an idea. "We don't need her," he said, his voice fierce. He ran to the van, throwing open the doors to reveal their makeshift medical setup. The angels were done begging. They'd save Tommy themselves. But could a bunch of bikers really pull it off? And why was the doctor so heartless? The answer was darker than anyone expected. The hospital parking lot buzzed with tension as Jake yanked open the van's back doors. The crowd of onlookers whispered, their eyes wide. Inside the van was a jumble of medical supplies, bandages, needles, bottles of medicine, and a flickering heart monitor that looked like it belonged in a junkyard. The Hells Angels weren't doctors, but they were determined to save Tommy. Big Al cradled the boy's head, his deep voice steady. "Hang in there, kid. We got this." Tommy's face was ghostly white, his breathing shallow. The blood from his leg soaked the stretcher, dripping onto the pavement. Jake climbed into the van, grabbing a bag of saline and a needle. "I've done this before," he muttered, but his hands shook as he tried to find a vein. The other angels formed a wall around the van, blocking the security guards who were inching closer. "Back off," Mitch growled, his eyes blazing. The guards hesitated, unsure how to handle a gang of angry bikers. Dr. Ellis stood at the hospital doors, watching with a cold stare. Why wouldn't she help? Something wasn't right. Rewind to earlier that day, before the chaos. Back at the Hells Angels clubhouse, Tommy's accident had set everything in motion. The clubhouse was a gritty place, filled with a smell of oil and cigarette smoke. The Angels were like brothers, loyal to a fault, but they weren't saints. They fixed bikes, ran odd jobs, and sometimes got into trouble with the law. But to Tommy, they were heroes. They'd taken him in when his parents died years ago, and Mitch had raised him like his own son. When Jake brought Tommy to the clubhouse, bleeding and scared, the Angels sprang into action. Big Al, the leader, had seen plenty of injuries in his time. He'd been in bar fights, motorcycle crashes, and worse. "That cuts deep," he said, peeling back Tommy's jeans. "He needs a real doctor." The others nodded, but Mitch's face darkened. "The hospital's gonna give us trouble," he said. "They don't like us." The Angels had a bad reputation in Red Hollow. People whispered about them, calling them criminals. The truth was messy Asher. They bent the rules, but they also helped folks in their own way, like fixing cars for free or scaring off bullies. Jake, the youngest angel, had a different idea. "We've got the van," he said. Over the years, the Angels had collected medical supplies, some donated, some found after late night runs. Jake had learned basic first aid in prison, where he'd spent a year for a fight he didn't start. "I can patch him up if we have to," Jake said, but his voice wavered. Big Al shook his head. "No way. Tommy needs a hospital." So they loaded him into the van and sped off, hoping for the best. Now, in the hospital parking lot, hope was fading. Dr. Ellis's refusal stung like a slap. "This is a private hospital," she said sharply. "We don't treat just anyone." Big Al's face turned red. "He's a kid, not a stray dog." But the doctor walked away, leaving security to handle the mess. The Angels were furious, but they didn't have time to argue. Tommy was slipping away. Jake worked fast, hooking up the saline drip. "Stay with me, Tommy," he whispered. The boy's eyes fluttered open, and he managed a weak smile. "You're gonna make me a biker yet, huh?" he mumbled. Jake laughed, but it was forced. The truth was, none of them knew if they could pull this off. The van supplies were old, and Jake's skills were rusty. Plus, the security guards were calling for backup. Sirens wailed in the distance, cops were coming. Then Mitch noticed something odd. Dr. Ellis was back at the hospital doors whispering to a man in a suit. The man looked nervous, glancing at the angels and then at his phone. Mitch's gut twisted. "She's hiding something," he muttered to Big Al. The leader's eyes narrowed. "Keep an eye on her," he told Mitch. "This ain't just about insurance." As Jake bandaged Tommy's leg, a new problem arose. The heart monitor beeped wildly. Tommy's pulse was dropping. "He's losing too much blood," Jake yelled. The angels scrambled, searching the van for anything that could help. Then Big Al found a small vial labeled epinephrine. "This'll keep his heart going," he said. But his voice was unsure. None of them were doctors. One wrong move could make things worse. The sirens grew louder. The crowd pressed closer, phones out, recording everything. The angels were trapped cops on the way, Tommy fading, and a doctor who wouldn't budge. Mitch glared at Dr. Ellis, still whispering with the man in the suit. "What's your game?" he muttered under his breath. Suddenly, Tommy gasped, his body jerking. Jake froze, the needle in his hand. "He's crashing," he shouted. Big Al made a split-second decision. "We're moving him now." He slammed the van doors shut, and the angels jumped in, ready to peel out. But where could they go? The hospital was their only shot, and the cops were closing in. As the van's engine roared, Dr. Ellis stepped forward, her face pale. "Wait," she called, her voice cracking. What did she want now? Was she finally going to help her? Was this another trick? The van's engine roared as Big Al gripped the steering wheel, ready to speed away from the hospital parking lot. Tommy lay in the back, his small body trembling, the heart monitor beeping erratically. Jake worked frantically, pressing bandages against the gash in Tommy's leg, but the blood kept coming. "He's not gonna make it if we don't get help," Jake shouted, his voice tight with panic. The Hell's Angels were tough, but they were out of their depth. The siren screamed closer cops would be here any second. The crowd of onlookers backed away, their phones still recording the chaos. Then Dr. Ellis's voice cut through the noise. "Wait," she yelled, running toward the van, her white coat flapping. The man in the suit tried to grab her arm, but she shook him off. Her face was different, now scared, not cold. "I'll help him," she said, her words shaky. The angels froze. Was this a trick? Mitch leaned out the van window, his eyes like daggers. "Why the change of heart, Doc? You let him bleed out here." Dr. Ellis glanced at the man in the suit, then back at the angels. "It's not what you think," she whispered. "Please, let me help." Big Al didn't trust her, but Tommy's gasps were getting weaker. "Fine," he growled, "but you're coming with us." Before Dr. Ellis could protest, Mitch and another angel grabbed her, pulling her into the van. The man in the suit shouted, "You can't do this!" But the van's doors slammed shut, and Big Al hit the gas. Tires screeched as they sped out of the parking lot, leaving the crowd and the approaching cop cars behind. What had they just done? Kidnapping a doctor? This was crazy, even for the Hell's Angels. Hours earlier, back at the clubhouse, the Angels had been piecing together their plan. After Tommy's accident, they'd known the hospital might be trouble. Red Hollow's hospital had a reputation for turning away folks who couldn't pay, especially people like the Angels, who the town saw as troublemakers. But Tommy was just a kid, and they thought the hospital would make an exception. Mitch had been the most worried. "They've got no reason to help us," he told Big Al. "They've been looking for an excuse to push us out of town for years." Big Al had nodded grimly. The Angels had enemies in Red Hollow cops, town officials, and even some shady folks who didn't like their influence. The club had been in a quiet war with a local businessman, Mr. Carver, who owned half the town, including the hospital. Carver had been trying to drive the Angels out, claiming they scared off his customers. The angels suspected he was behind the hospital's strict no insurance, no service rule, but they had no proof yet. Now, in the speeding van, Dr. Ellis was squeezed between Mitch and Jake, her hands shaking. "You don't understand," she said, her voice low. "It wasn't my choice to turn you away." Big Al glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Then, whose was it?" he demanded. Dr. Ellis swallowed hard, her eyes darting to Tommy, who was barely conscious. "Carver," she whispered. "He runs the hospital. He told me not to treat anyone connected to you. He said he'd ruin me if I did." The angels exchanged looks. Carver. It made sense now. But why was he targeting a kid? Mitch leaned closer to Dr. Ellis. "What's he got against Tommy?" he asked, his voice dangerous. Dr. Ellis hesitated, then spilled the truth. "It's not just Tommy. Carver's been watching your club. He thinks you're hiding something big. He told me to keep you out of the hospital no matter what." Jake's head snapped up from where he was tending to Tommy. "Hiding something? Like what?" Dr. Ellis shook her head. "I don't know. He wouldn't tell me. But he's got people watching you. That man in the suit, he's one of Carver's guys." The angel's faces darkened. This wasn't just about a hospital roulette, was personal. Carver was playing a dangerous game, and Tommy was caught in the middle. The van hit a bump, and Tommy groaned, his face twisted in pain. Dr. Ellis pushed forward, checking his pulse. "He needs surgery," she said urgently. "The cut's too deep. He's losing blood faster than we can stop it." Jake cursed, tossing aside a soaked bandage. "We don't have a surgeon in here, lady." Dr. Ellis took a deep breath. "I can do it. I'm a surgeon, but I need a clean space and proper tools, not this junkyard ambulance." Big Al's mind raced. They couldn't go back to the hospital, not with Carver's men and the cops waiting. The clubhouse wasn't safe either. Carver's goons might be watching. Then Jake had an idea. "The old mill," he said. "It's abandoned. Got a big room we can clean. We've got supplies there." Big Al nodded. "It's our only shot." He turned the van toward the edge of town where the old mill sat, forgotten and crumbling. As they sped through the dark streets, Dr. Ellis worked to stabilize Tommy, her hands steady despite the chaos, but the angels weren't out of danger. A black car appeared in the rearview mirror, tailing them. Mitch cursed. "Carver's guys," he said, grabbing a wrench from the floor. The car sped up, its headlights glaring. Were they coming for Dr. Ellis or something worse? Suddenly, Tommy's heart monitor flatlined. Dr. Ellis gasped, grabbing the defibrillator. "Clear," she shouted, pressing the paddles to Tommy's chest. The van swerved as Big Al fought to keep control. The black car was gaining, and the flatline's piercing beep filled the air. Would Tommy survive? And what did Carver want so badly that he let a kid die to get it? The van tore through the dark streets of Red Hollow, its engine screaming as Big Al swerved around corners to shake the black car, tailing them. Inside, chaos reigned. Dr. Ellis pressed the defibrillator paddles to Tommy's chest again, shouting, "Clear!" The machine whined, and Tommy's body jolted. The heart monitor beeped once, then twice a weak pulse. "He's back!" Jake yelled, relief flooding his voice. But Dr. Ellis's face was grim. "It won't last unless we operate now," she said, wiping sweat from her brow. The mill was their only hope, but the black car was gaining, its headlights like angry eyes in the dark. Mitch gripped his wrench, peering out the back window. "They're not giving up," he growled. The man in the suit was in the car, his face lit by a phone screen. Was he calling for more of Carver's men? Big Al took a sharp turn down a dirt road, the van bouncing wildly. The old mill loomed ahead, its broken windows glowing faintly under the moon. It was a crumbling wreck, but it had a large, empty room the angels had used for secret meetings. "We'll set up there," Big Al said, slamming the brakes. The angels leapt out, carrying Tommy's stretcher and Dr. Ellis into the mill. Jake grabbed the medical supplies, his hands shaking. The mill smelled of dust and rust, but the main room was clear enough. They laid Tommy on a rickety table, and Dr. Ellis barked orders. Boil water, find clean cloths, anything sterile. The angel scrambled, turning the mill into a makeshift operating room. Jake lit a lantern, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Dr. Ellis worked fast, sterilizing her hands with rubbing alcohol from the van. This is insane, she muttered, but her focus was sharp. She began stitching Tommy's wound, her hand steady despite the chaos. The angels stood guard, their eyes darting to the windows. The black car had stopped 100 yards away, its engine idling. They're waiting for something, Mitch whispered, his knuckles white around the wrench. Then they heard Ida low rumble. Not one engine, but many. Motorcycles. The angels tensed, thinking it was Carver's men, but Big Al grinned. That's our crew, he said. Headlights flooded the mill as a dozen Hell's Angels roared up, their bikes surrounding the building. They'd gotten Jake's frantic call for backup. Nobody's getting through us, said a burly biker named Red, cracking his knuckles. But inside, things took a turn. Dr. Ellis paused, her face pale. There's a problem, she said. The wound's infected. I need antibiotics now. The van had none. Jake cursed, kicking a crate. We're out of time, he shouted. Tommy's breathing grew shallow again, his small hand limp. Mitch's eyes filled with tears. He's all I got, he whispered. Suddenly, the black car's door opened, and the man in the suit stepped out, holding a small box. I have what you need, he called, his voice smug. The angels froze. Was it a trap? Why would Carver's man help? Big Al stepped forward, his voice like thunder. What's your price? The man smirked. Give me what Carver wants, and the kid lives. What was Carver after? And could the angels trust this deal with Tommy's life slipping away?